In this video, we're going to talk about how to work with positive and negative numbers, and we're going to talk about how you do adding and subtracting and multiplying and dividing, and we're going to go through 50 questions. I'll do 10 of the adding, 10 of the subtracting, 10 of the multiplying, 10 of the dividing, and then I'll have a quiz for you at the very end where you can do 10 questions and kind of test yourself. But what I recommend, if you're somewhat familiar with this already, is to go ahead and take a photo. I'll get out of the way here and try these problems on your own, and then we'll go through them together so you can kind of practice and learn as we go. So go ahead and take a screenshot, and let's get started. So the first problem now is -7 plus -4. Now, you want to think of some type of a framework for understanding negative numbers. One way that I recommend is positive is like walking forwards, okay? And negative is like walking backwards. So if you think about walking backwards 7 steps, plus you walk backwards another 4 steps, how many steps are you in relation to where you started? Are you forward or are you back? Well, in this case, you're going to see you're back 11 steps. We walk back 7 plus another 4 back. That's 11 backwards. That's a -11. Now, after doing these problems for a while, you might start to kind of get a familiarity with saying like, oh, if I have 2 numbers that are negative and I'm adding, I just add the 2 numbers together and it's a negative number. So you'll start to kind of get quicker at it. But in the beginning, you might want to think about it kind of like in a real life scenario. Now for number 2, we've got a -12 plus a +8. Now when you're adding and one's negative and one's positive, you can almost think of it as like a tug of war. Like who's going to win? Are the people on the negative side going to win or the people on the positive side going to win? And in this case, you can see there's more negatives than positives. How many more? 4 more. So that means this is actually going to be a -4. Now, to go back to my walking analogy, if you were to walk backwards 12 steps, then +8 is like walking forward 8 steps. Where are you in relation to where you started? Are you further ahead or are you further backwards? Well, you're going to be further backwards because you walked backwards more than you walked forwards, right? So that's one way to think about it when you're adding, these positive and negative numbers. So let's go to number 3 now. We've got 0 plus -10. Now the nice thing about 0 is it's nothing, right? So you can almost like say, oh, this is just a -10. But again, if you want to think of that walking analogy, if I walk 0 steps, that's like 0 forward or backwards. I'm just standing right where I am, right? Not moving. Plus I walk backwards 10 steps. Where am I in relation to where I started? I'm 10 steps backwards. That's a -10, right? Now you can also think about earning money and spending money, and I'll show you some examples using that kind of analogy in a minute. So for number 4, we've got a +5 plus a -15. So if you like the step analogy, think about going forwards 5 steps plus then going backwards 15 steps. Where are you in relation to where you started? You're going to be 10 steps backwards. That's going to be a -10. Now, another way to look at it is, again, that tug of war. You say, oh, I got positives and negatives. The negatives, there's more of them. That means that it's going to be a negative answer. How many more of them do you have? You would actually have to, in your mind or on paper, subtract the bigger number minus the smaller number. 15 minus 5 is 10, but it's going to be a -10 because we had more negatives than positives. If you want to think about earning money and spending money, you can say, well, I earned $5 today, maybe doing some chores, But then I went to the store and I bought something that cost $15. So what happened is I had to kind of, spend more than I had in my wallet. I had to actually maybe go borrow some money from a friend or a parent, etc. So that's kind of like I now owe somebody $10. See, negative, right? So let's go to number 5. So -6 plus -8. So a negative plus a negative is a negative, right? Because you're like going backwards 6 steps plus going backwards another 8 steps. That's 14 steps backwards. That's a -14. So you're starting to see a pattern. It's like if you add a positive plus a positive, you just get a positive number. That's what we learned from day 1, right? If you have a negative plus a negative, you just take those 2 numbers and add them together. It's a negative number. So in this case, it was like 6 plus 8 is 14, but it's a -14. They're both negative. They're both going the same direction, right? Backwards. The toughest problems, I think, are when you have one positive and one negative. You have to decide, is the answer going to be negative or is it going to be positive? If we have more negative numbers, it's going to be negative. If we have more positive numbers, it's going to be positive. But the way we find that actual number is by taking the larger minus the smaller. We take the difference to see how many more positives we have or how many more negatives we have. So let's look at that for number 6 here. 7 plus 12. Oh, they're both positive. That's what we learned a long time ago. That's just 19, right? For number 7, negative 9 plus 15. Oh, I've got more positives than negatives. How many more positives? Oh, 6 more. The way I did that is I just took 15 minus 9, that's 6. I knew it was positive because I had more positives than negatives. If you like the walking analogy, you walk forward 15 steps, you walk backwards 9 steps, you're actually 6 steps forward from where you started. For number 8, we've got 18 plus negative 7. Ooh, I've got more positives than negatives. How many more? 11 more. It's going to be a positive 11 because I have more positives than negatives. So after a while, you can kind of go faster with this, right? So for number 9, negative 17 plus negative 8. Oh, they're both negative and I'm adding. I just add the numbers. That's 25 and it's going to be a negative 25. See, it's like you spent $17 plus you spent another $8. Oh, you spent $25. That's like a negative $25. You're like, taking it out of your wallet, it's going away. It's decreasing your balance in your account. For number 10, now we've got 4 plus negative 16. Oh, now we've got more negatives than positives. See, 16 is bigger than 4. How much bigger? Well, 16 minus 4 is 12, so it's 12 more negatives than positives, so the answer is going to be a negative 12. If we had more positives than negatives, the answer would be positive. So it's kind of like that tug-of-war, Okay, now addition I think is a little bit easier than subtraction, but let's go over to subtraction now. So let's go ahead and take a screenshot, see if you can do these 10 problems on your own. We'll go through them together and practice, but this tends to be the toughest for students because a lot of negatives in here, right? The way that I like to make it easier for myself and for the students I work with is I say, take the subtraction and change it into an addition. Now you just can't change the problem because then it's a different problem, right? So what we do to counterbalance that is we say that subtraction is like adding the opposite. Okay, so if I change this to addition, I change the second number to the opposite sign. Because subtracting 14 is like going backwards 14 steps, right? But that's kind of like adding a negative 14. See, same thing, you're going back 14 steps. So that's what I do is I change the subtraction to an addition problem. Then we're back to what we talked about here. I've got more negatives than positives. How many more? 8 more. So it's a negative 8. Okay. For number 12, we've got a negative 5 minus 4. Well, subtraction is like adding the opposite. So if this was positive, I make it negative. If this is negative, I make it positive. I change it to the opposite sign. Now it's a little bit easier. They're both negative numbers and I'm adding them together. That's going to be negative 9. Negative 5 plus negative 4, negative 9. For number 13, got a subtraction problem. So let's make it easier on ourselves. We'll say subtraction is like adding the opposite. So I change this from a negative to a positive. This is what we learned a long time ago. 10 plus 4 is 14. See, a lot easier. Number 14, negative 7 minus negative 10. Okay, so subtraction is like adding the opposite. Got more positives than negatives, so the answer is going to be positive. How many more positives than negatives? 3 more. That's going to be a positive 3. Okay, for number 15, negative 6 minus 8. Well, another way to think about this, this is not my favorite way, but sometimes teachers will teach it this way. They'll say, imagine if you're on the number line and you're over here at, let's just say, negative 6, right here, okay? If you subtract 8, that means you're going to the left 8. You're going backwards 8. So that's going to put you at negative 14. The only issue is that when these numbers get a lot larger, it's hard to go on the number line and say, oh, here I'm at 258, and then I'm going, the numbers can get a little bit big. But again, my favorite method is to think about, oh, subtraction is like adding the opposite. So I've got 2 negatives. I know when I have 2 negatives and I'm adding, I just add the numbers together and it's negative. Or if you want, think about walking backwards 6 steps plus walking backwards another 8 steps. You're walking backwards 14 steps. So you're 14 steps back or negative from where you started, right? Okay, for number 16, what do you think on this one? 16 minus negative 7. Remember, subtraction is like adding the opposite, okay? 16 plus 7, that's what we learned a long time ago. That's just adding 2 positive numbers, 23. Now, look at that number, that problem again. See, if you're on your number line, let's just say you're over here at 16, right, to the right, 16. When you subtract, you normally say, oh, subtracting is making it smaller. It's going to the left, right? But a negative number, see, I'll just put that in parentheses for a minute. A negative number is like the opposite. So when you subtract, normally you go to the left, but if it's a negative number, that tells you to do the opposite. You're going to go to the right, which is going to put you at 23. Okay, so different way to look at it. I like to think of subtraction as adding the opposite. Change it to an addition problem. This one here, -1 minus 0. Remember, subtraction is like adding the opposite. You really can't have a -0, it's just 0. So -1 plus nothing is -1. Okay. Number 18, we've got 5 minus 16. Now, when the numbers are smaller, a lot of times you can just kind of quickly figure it out, like, oh, I've got 5 of something. I take away those 5 items, and then I have to take away how many more to take away a total of 16. I'd have to take a total of another 11 away. That's a -11. So some people kind of think of it like that. But I just think of adding the opposite. Oh, I've got more negatives than positives. I used to do this kind of way of balance, like a scale, those old-fashioned, remember these old-fashioned scales like this? And it's kind of like a balance, and you say, okay, all right, I put 5 on the positive side. Okay, I put 16 on the negative side. Oh, wow, that's a lot heavier. It's tilting way. Now, if you had a 5 and a -5, it would perfectly balance out. It's like 0, like they're canceling each other out. It's balanced. But if you have more on the negative side, you're tilting to that negative side because you have 11 more negative than positive. It's like 5 of the negatives here are canceling with 5 of the positives, but you're still left with that 11 negatives, see? And then for number 19, when you subtract, adding the opposite, right? So you always want to change that second number, not this one, the one over here that you're to the right. More negatives than positives. How many more negatives? 1 more, so this is -1. And then for number 20, 7 minus 20, subtraction is like adding the opposite. We've got more negatives than positives. How many more? Well, just take the bigger number minus the smaller number. 20 minus 7 is 13. It's going to be a -13 because I have more negatives than positives. So let me erase the whiteboard. Let's talk about multiplying and dividing next. Okay, now moving on to multiplying and dividing. If you want to take a screenshot, I'll get out of the way for a second so you can take a picture and then try to do some of these problems on your own, and of course we'll go through them together. Okay, so now starting with multiplying, and I want to show you the rules first. So we have to kind of shift gears when we go from adding and subtracting to multiplying and dividing. Multiplying and dividing, here's what you want to remember. A positive times a positive is a positive. That's what we learned a long time ago, right? Just multiply the two numbers together. We just dealt with positive numbers. And if you have a negative times a negative, you get a positive. Okay, so two negatives multiply to a positive. But if one's negative and one's positive, or vice versa, one's positive, one's negative, oops, you're going to get a negative. Okay, so pretty simple. What you're used to, two positives, you get a positive. Two negatives, you get a positive. But if one's positive, one's negative, you're going to get a negative. The rules for dividing are exactly the same. If you divide a positive by a positive, or you divide a negative by a negative, or you divide a negative by a positive, or a positive by a negative, same exact rules. But you want to remember, adding, subtracting, it's different from multiplying and dividing. So let's practice. -7 times 4 is -28. Now, if you want a kind of real life scenario here, you can say to yourself, I spent $7, -7, right? It's going out of your wallet. And I did that 4 times. So that's -28. See, it's like you maybe bought 4 $7 items. That's $28 that you're spending, or negative. It's decreasing your balance, right? Number 22, we have 3 times -6. Now remember, with multiplication, it's commutative, meaning you can change the order and you're going to get the same result. With multiplication, also with addition. Subtraction and division, you can't change the order, you'll get something different. So if I wanted to, it doesn't really matter how I multiply these. I just know that one's positive, one's negative. When I have a positive times a negative, I get a negative. And this is a -18. I could think about it as walking backwards 6 steps, and I do that 3 times. That's going to put me back 18 steps backwards, right? For 23, -5 times -9, this is a +45. Okay, a negative times a negative is a positive. Sometimes teachers will use the analogy, they'll say, have you ever played that game where you say to somebody, I'm not going? You know, that means you're going. Like, if you say I'm not going, okay, the not is a negation. You're not going, right? But if you say I'm not going, okay, it's kind of like an Uno where you reverse and reverse. Those two reverses, they undo each other and you keep going the original direction that you're going, right? So number 24, negative 6 times 0. By the way, when these two numbers are right next to each other like that, that means multiplication with nothing in between. So anything times 0 is 0. Okay, we know that from earlier in math. 25, a negative 10 times a negative 12 is a positive 120. Two negatives multiplied to a positive. You can extrapolate that and say, well, you know, if you have 4 negatives, 6 negatives, 8 negatives, if there's an even number of negatives, it's going to multiply to a positive. If there's an odd number of negatives, like if I said I'm not going, that means you're not going, right? Because it's a negative. But if you said that 4 times, each 2 is going to cancel out and give you a positive. So an even number, you're going to get a positive. An odd number of negatives, you're going to get a negative. So 5 times negative 4 is negative 20. 27, negative 8 times negative 6 is positive 48. See those two negatives multiplying to a positive. A negative 1 times 17, one positive, one negative, we get a negative, it's negative 17. Negative 4 times 6, we know 4 times 6 is 24, but a negative times a positive is a negative. And for number 30, we've got a negative times a negative times a negative. So 3 negatives, that's an odd number of negatives, it's going to be negative. 1 times 1 is 1, times 2 is 2, so we get a negative 2. All right, so switching gears to division. Now remember, same rules for division as multiplication, so it makes it easy, not a lot to remember. When you see this fraction bar, that really is like a division sign. So this means 10 divided by negative 2. Positive divided by negative is a negative. 10 divided by 2 is 5, so we get a negative 5. For 32, a negative divided by negative is a positive. 144 divided by 12 is 12, so positive 12. A negative 8 divided by 1, that's a negative 8, because one's positive, one's negative. Anything divided by 1 is itself. 16 divided by negative 4, negative 4. Negative 121 divided by 11, that's negative 11. See again, one positive, one negative, you get a negative. If they're both negative, like this one, you're going to get a positive. So 32 divided by 4 is 8. 56 divided by 8 is 7, but one's positive, one's negative, we get a negative 7. Negative 81 divided by negative 9, that's going to be positive 9, because negative divided by negative is a positive. 100 divided by negative 10, negative 10, because one's positive, one's negative, we get a negative. Sometimes people get confused, like they'll say, Mario, you said that if I have more positives than negatives, it's going to be a positive. Those are the rules for adding, right? If you added 100 plus a negative 10, you would get a positive 90 because you have more positives than negatives. But see, the rules are different for multiplying and dividing than adding and subtracting. So you almost have to switch gears when you see adding and subtracting versus positive and multiplying and dividing. 72 divided by 9, that's what we learned a long time ago. It's just two positives. 72 divided by 9 is 8. So now, here's your chance to test. I'm going to mix them all up. We're going to do 10 problems and a little mini quiz. Take a screenshot. I'll put it on the board in just a second. See how many you can get right. Okay, so let's take this quiz now. See what you get. I'm going to go through them, so make sure you take the test first. So starting with 41, negative 7 minus 2. When I see a subtraction sign, I think of that as adding. The opposite. Always want to change that second number. A negative plus a negative is a negative. 7 plus 2 is 9. Again, this is like walking backwards 7 steps plus another 2 steps back. That's 9 steps back, right? For 42, what did you get? 6 plus negative 14. Well, when you add and you have more negatives than positives, that means the answer is going to be negative. If I had more positives than negatives, the answer would be positive. It's kind of like a tug-of-war. How many more negatives do I have? 8 more. This is going to be negative 8. For 43, what'd you get for this one? A negative 14 divided by negative 2. A negative divided by a negative is going to be a positive, and 14 divided by 2 is 7, so it's positive 7. For 44, 49 divided by negative 7, what did you get for that one? Positive divided by a negative is a negative, and 49 divided by 7 is going to be 7. So negative 7. And then for 45, we've got 5 times negative 8. They're next to each other. That means they're multiplied together. One positive, one negative. We're going to get a negative. 5 times 8 is 40, so a negative 40. One thing I wanted to mention is if you're enjoying this video and you say, I really like the way that Mario explains these things, consider joining the channel as a channel member at the additional videos level. You can get access to my Algebra 1 course. Go through about 85 lessons, taking you step by step through a typical Algebra 1 course with these kinds of explanations, building on the previous concepts, as well as many other videos, almost 400 videos on that additional videos section of the channel membership site. So check that out. Well, let's finish this quiz here. So for 46, what'd you get for this one? -6 minus -10. Well, when you subtract, it's like adding the opposite. We've got more positives than negatives. How many more? 4 more. So you should have gotten +4, right? For 47, what'd you get? 5 minus 12. Well, subtraction's like adding the opposite. So we've got more negatives than positives. How many more? 7 more. So it's a -7. For 48, what'd you get? -8 plus -4. They're both negative and we're adding, so it's going to be -12. Again, it's kind of like walking backwards 8 steps plus another 4 steps. That's walking backwards 12 steps, or a -12. What'd you get for 49? 0 minus 16. Well, 0 is kind of like nothing, so you could just say -16, but I like to think of it as adding the opposite. 0 plus a -16, oh, it's just a -16. And then for the last question, a negative times a negative is a positive. 1 times 2 is 2, so this is going to be +2. So let me know in the comments how many of these you were able to get right. And if you want more practice, I'll put a video right there talking more about how to master negative numbers. So follow me over to that video for more practice. And remember to join as a channel member. I'll see you in that membership site.